Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today in the studio, we have Chris Howard, Vice President, Federal Sales at Vectra, V-E-C-T-R-A, Vectra AI. And there are people that may have heard of Vectra AI, maybe listeners who have not heard of it, but that's why we have Chris on the show today to tell you about Vectra AI and how they can help your agency reach their goals. I'm trying to title this show, Chris. I think I'm going to title it maybe Advances in Threat Detection and Response. Is that a good title, you think?
I think it's a great title, and it lends into right what we do, and we can go. Obviously, we'll talk a lot about it as we go on. But I think that's a great title.
Yeah. I mean, the alternate title is Not Your Father's Threat Detection, but that's a little dated. Maybe the millennials won't know what the reference to that. But before we begin, perhaps you can give us maybe a little nutshell, the origin story of Vectra AI, and maybe a little case study, and then we'll jump in with the tough questions.
Sure. So from an origin, Vectra has been around for about 11, maybe 12 years. The founder of the company was heavy into the networking space and been doing that. So a lot of visibility around network traffic and what's going on the on-premises networks. And his customers started asking him, hey, you have visibility to everything on my network. You see what's going on. But what I really need is someone to find malicious threats, right? You currently do a good job of managing my network, but how do I find out if there's bad actors or malicious threats? So that was kind of the problem statement where our leaders started a company, built a company, called it Vectra AI, and started basically taking in as much network feeds and data as they could to try to understand, okay, how can we, using data science and security-led AI, figure out what's malicious? How do we find the unknown? And that's what they started doing 12 years ago. And as we've progressed as a company, and we've gotten very good at it, and we continue to progress and build additional algorithms. And I mean, if you look at like in a one-word sentence, what we do is we want to think like an attacker, because if you think like an attacker, then you know how to catch the attacker. And that's a simple way to put what we do. And I'll give you a little bit of an example of that. We recently completed an insider threat modeling exercise where the organization that we were dealing with had an offensive cyber specialist who was given the same permissions, privileges, access as a legitimate developer in the live environment. And then over the course of several weeks, this threat actor did a low and slow threat, observed the environment. It looked like they were supposed to be in the environment, so nothing malicious popped out right in the beginning. But as this individual started to doing reconnaissance and looking at different pathways to data and different C2 avenues that they could exploit, slowly they started to get deeper and deeper into the environment, and they bypassed all of the external perimeter tools, obviously, because that's on the perimeter, and none of the tooling in the agency was able to catch it. Most of that tooling was signature-based, right? Finding the known. Well, this individual was being treated as an insider threat, so none of those tools would capture that person. So after numerous weeks of looking at the different steps that this individual was taking, we were able to identify for this agency that this was an insider threat because of a number of different activities. It wasn't one thing the individual did. It was a number of different activities and jumps this person made inside the organization, with their end goal being to extract a bunch of data through different channels. So it was a big victory for us in that we were the only tool in the environment that was able to catch this individual. So none of their traditional IPS or perimeter-based security or signature-based security tools were able to identify or even scratch the surface of knowing that this was a malicious insider threat activity. So after about 3 weeks, we went to the customer and we said, okay, we've identified this, we prioritized, we showed them all the data of the steps that this individual was taking. And we did all that through our AI and ML, which I know that we'll touch on as we go through it. So that's a quick example and a big win for us, because that's what we're trying to do, find the unknown.
Yeah. Music's my ears. I'm in the classroom tomorrow night. And what I teach my students is shut up and listen. And 12 years, taking a look at the data. I mean, this is like find out what's going on before you build the bridge. It could be the wrong bridge and then slowly try to understand your customer, in this case, understand the attacker. And then, and only then, do you kind of go out with confidence, because any other way, there's just too much going on. I mean, there's the petabytes of data, There's a podcast in town called Feds at the Edge. There's sensors on railroad tracks, there's sensors in satellites, there's sensors in cars and boats and planes and tanks. And how do you really have to have, I think, a slow, methodical approach to understanding the data, which leads us to the next discussion. And you had the phrase that pays, AI, artificial intelligence. So, So is this the magic sauce, using artificial intelligence to help support threat detection?
I mean, I truly believe it is. And the foundation that we start with is this, what we call attack signal intelligence, right? And that is about providing high efficacy, low noise, and prioritized detections of what is traditionally unknown, right? So our approach to this problem is fundamentally different than any other tools in the market, because what we do is we partner with security professionals that understand what the attacker methods are, right? And then we partner those security researchers with leading data scientists that are employed by us and part of our company. And what they do at that point is they start developing these algorithms and work backwards from the problem with the security researcher to build algorithms and AI. So you're getting into the AI piece now, that can think like an attacker and detect an attacker. And the beauty of it is that it eliminates the human need for it, right? Because humans get tired. They have too many buttons to push or too many tools to look at. Whereas our AI can correlate and identify particular tactics and techniques, and then we apply the right machine learning or AI to bear uncovering that signal. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what attack signal intelligence is. And it's incredibly hard. This is not an easy problem to solve. And most others in the industry that claim to use AI and ML are using what we call a kind of a superficial math-led approach. And that math-led approach simply says, okay, here's something different. And that's not really solving the problem. If I just notify you as a security analyst that there's something different out there, we're just creating noise, and it's not solving any of the problems. So you're just under a deluge of alerts across multiple tool sets. And it's more times than not, these show up as false positives. So our AI and ML, we basically map it to the entire MITRE attack and defend framework, so that regardless of the scale or location of your environment, and this is a key point, we don't have to decrypt any of your traffic or reach back out to an external SaaS platform. So we're giving you a lot of cool benefits when it comes to being able to predict multiple movements inside an environment of nothing that's ever been seen before. But our AI can correlate and just put those pieces together and say, okay, this one thing that we saw was just different. Once again, different doesn't mean bad. But then as we see successive attempts to move within the environment, our AI then becomes very predictive, and it prioritizes those up to SOC analysts. Because the biggest thing that we're trying to prevent from a SOC team, a security operations center, is them being fatigued. They get thousands of alerts a day. And if you don't have a way to prioritize and really raise up threats that we deem are critical and need immediate attention, they're never going to get to the root cause of what the problems are. There's just too much information, too much data, and too many tools feeding them information. So that's kind of at a very high level.
There are people who are listening to this who are saying, okay, Chris, step back. The last 100 websites I went to, they all said AI. So they're all doing AI. And then, I think we may have talked about this before the interview began, is that, back in the day when you were in high school, the cloud became popular and everyone was a cloud company. And it was called cloud washing because everyone's a cloud. Now, everyone claims to be AI. It's called AI washing. And so, it just seems a little ridiculous, some of these companies that claim that. But if, I went to your website, vectra.ai, and I read the white papers, and there's meat and potatoes on this website. And there's, if you're listening to this and you work for the federal government, there's a white paper here called Supporting the Federal Government's Zero Trust Strategy with Data Science and AI. This is not any marketing fluff. This is the real deal here. I mean, you did a deep dive in this. I don't know who did the deep dive, but not too many is this deep. So I think that may be your differentiators, that you're not just a superficial AI, huh?
Yeah, not at all. And as a matter of fact, with a lot of our customers, we encourage them, and we often set up time for them to speak with our data scientists, because everyone is trying to understand what AI means, and they want to understand how do we come up with writing our algorithms and our machine learning. And so we think it's a great opportunity for us to have them talk to our data scientists. How many companies out there have a massive team of data scientists that are just working on problem sets and watching the way that attacks and insider threats happen, and then creating automated ways to respond to it, to alleviate all of the human capital that's required to go through absurd amounts of alerts and data. So I know there's a big thing in this industry. When I think of AI, I think of some way to simply automate a task, right? How do I don't even know what a good example is to give you right now, but there's so many companies that use that term that it's hard to differentiate yourself. But that's why we give the opportunity to talk to our data scientists and prove out the technology. Once they get on the phone with some of our internal folks, it becomes very clear that there is a definite understanding of the problem set we're trying to solve. And it's an important problem set. People are being attacked every day. This is not just automating water flow, which is also very important. But this is, there's a lot of bad actors, and we're seeing it every day. If you have the news on right now, there's probably some news channel talking about some malicious attack or insider threat problem. And so I think we're doing a great job of not only surfacing these attacks, but also helping customers get to them in a timely manner so that it doesn't become something a lot more significant.
I talked to a lot of people on this podcast. One of my most memorable guests was a guy named Jeff Gallimore from Excella. They do DevSecOps and software development. He's a brilliant guy. And, we talked about continuous improvement. Okay. And then security people talk about continuous testing. Oh, okay. It's continuous. And the way I understand your product, I did some research, read some articles about Vectra. It's almost like it's, dare I say it, but it's continuously learning based on the situation of the system it's in, and it's improving the algorithm while it's going along. This is what they have, this thing called self-healing concrete. It's kind of like that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's in our world, we call it, there's multiple different types of learning. You have supervised learning and unsupervised learning. The unsupervised learning is where the models do learn over time. So when we go into an environment and say we can stand things up in one day, right off the bat, we'll start detecting, signature-based attacks and things of that nature. But our unsupervised learning, our AI and algorithms, it takes a week or two for them to soak in, to really understand, okay, what does normal look like first? And then from there, going in and just continuously learn, okay, we've seen this before, we haven't seen this before. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't make it a malicious threat. But over time, as you piece things together, the AI does continue to learn. So it is a pretty fascinating thing when you think about it. And it's what separates us from a lot of our competition, because a lot of them are just doing that supervised signature-based detections.
I keep thinking of malicious actors expanding and moving horizontally through networks. Mm-hmm. What about the data? If you're focusing on the individuals, you have to have some kind of monitoring of the data exfiltrating too, I would think, huh?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And so we not only look at we look at the hosts, we look at the C2 channels. So we're looking at all aspects of the environment, because you're right. I'd say the majority of the time, the main goal of some of these bad actors is to exfiltrate something out of the environment, some data, right? So that is a huge piece of the benefit that we're providing, because that is the number one thing that they're trying to do when they get in there, for the most part, at least in the environments we play in.
Okay, let's see how well you play with others. Remember, in third grade, Chris doesn't play well with others. So how do you play well? I'm at the AWS conference here in June. I'm going to do 3 interviews, and I think of Amazon Web Services. I have a friend who owns a Microsoft. He's a Microsoft partner. And so these are players you have to get along with. So do you get along with all of them, or just some of them, or where do you fit in this ecosystem of cloud service providers?
Yeah, you brought up some, and I know we have partnerships with AWS, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Splunk, and so many others, but we pride ourselves on being hyper-focused on providing the attack signal and intelligence across a number of different areas. And we look at it as having 5 protect surfaces. I'll get into the 5th protect, but I'll go over the first 4. So today we provide detections across your network, your SaaS environment, your identity, and public cloud. So that's 4 of the 5 attack surfaces. So we have network coverage, regardless of on-premises or cloud-hosted networks, to include those running in AWS, Azure, and GCP. We have detections built in to audit and observe activities in M365 and Azure AD environments from an identity perspective. And we can also similarly detect behaviors across control planes of the cloud. So today that's AWS, and here in the very near future, we're going to be doing that for Microsoft Azure as well. So that's the 4 of the 5 protect surfaces. The 5th one that we don't play in, but that we partner with very well is the EDR, endpoint detection and response. And those are the companies like the CrowdStrikes, Sentinel-1s, Microsoft Defenders, Carbon Blacks. And we are very complementary, not only with all the first 4 I mentioned, the cloud, the SaaS, the on-prem, the identity, but also on the EDR space. So we can take a lot of their feeds, pull those into our product, and get better telemetry across the entirety of the environment. So I would say our ecosystem is incredibly rich. Do we have competitors? Sure. There's people out there that say they compete with us, and there certainly are capabilities that they have that do compete with us. But our job is to do what we do very, very well, and where we don't play, we want to have a very rich ecosystem in partnership with them. And if you looked at our website, or anyone that goes out and looks at our website at our ecosystem partners, I mean, there's 40, 50, 60 different partners out there.
If you take a piece of paper, put a column down, one set of column, you put down network detection response, NDR, then put down security information management, security event management. Okay, CIEM. I think, I've seen that on Gartner over the years. Do you compete with that, complete separate, integrate with that, or you're complete different?
Yeah, well, completely different and integrate, but incredibly valuable to each other. So NDR is the network detection and response, and that's where we live. And then you have the SIMs. When we look at customers, that completes 2/3 of the security operations center triad. And so we get a lot of detections and metadata that we can pump into the SIM or a backend data lake like Splunk, and it just enriches their data. The issue with just the SIM itself is that it's mostly a reactive posture, right? There's so many different tools that feed into the SIM. So what we can do is we can give them a lot of rich detections to add into what SOC analysts are going to try to correlate amongst all their other tools. So 100% complementary with not only the backend SIMs, but the data lakes as well. So your Splunks, Elastics, and there's so many of them that exist out there. But those are the 2 biggest ones in our space for sure.
When you look at the Washington, D.C. area, people talk about spring training for the Nationals. We know that. And they're talking about the president's initiative for cybersecurity. What a strange town we live in. You can have that same conversation at coffee at Starbucks, and hey, you go from who's playing third base to what's going on. So from a security perspective, I mean, you talk about being security-led AI. What about this most recent initiative that came out, the 39-page report? And do you fit in with that, or is it something contrasted with you, or where do you fit in with this most recent cybersecurity strategy?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you look at the pillars of the zero trust architecture, we live and die in that network pillar. And that is a huge component of what the federal government has put out there, right? The network is one of the most key pieces of any environment. And I think historically, they haven't done a good job, not the government itself, but anybody, because they thought that perimeter security, right? Your firewalls and your multi-factor authentication, if you had that, you were completely clear of any vulnerabilities or any malicious attacks or any insider threats. Well, that's just not the case. I mean, these perimeter securities are, as some people say, build a moat around your environment. Those are getting bypassed every day. So once that individual has bypassed those and it's on the network, then what? How do you find it? Because your legacy IDS and perimeter security, once they're in the network, those tools are no longer capable of finding them. So from a network perspective, I think we have an incredibly valuable role in not only what the executive office has put out, but what CISA has put out and many other organizations have put out. One of the challenges is that the network, it appears to be the last thing they're thinking about, right? They went from perimeter to multi-factor authentication to endpoint. And now we're building a robust platform of customers that are starting to bring to the surface that, hey, we don't really have the tools on the network that are really helping us. We don't have the tools that are raising up and prioritizing what is malicious. Our SOC team and security analysts are having to take alerts from 20 different tools and trying to correlate that. And it's almost impossible. Humans get tired. They forget what they saw 2 weeks ago. Software and the AI and ML doesn't get tired, and it doesn't forget. And so I think that there's a clear mapping to what came out in the executive orders and also what CISA has put out around just zero trust architecture. So there is a valuable piece and part for us to play.
Sounds like another layer of defense. If something gets through the MFA, the guy gets sick and tired of it and turns it off, or credentials get compromised. The MFA is great. Zero trust is great. But what happens when they get inside the system? Then it takes, maybe that's, the initial part of our conversation was advances in threat detection. It's not your old, I learned that term IDS, I don't know, 20 years ago,
yeah,
maybe 15 years ago.
And they're still deployed.
And that's what I can't believe. I mean, when I taken the silly test 15, 20 years ago, and I had an intention. Yeah, anytime it'll be detected. Oh, yeah. You check box C. But I don't know if that, if you can go back even 4 years, because the detection has gotten so, and I think when we talk about, no more moat, the moat's everywhere, the moat's all across the United States. There's so much going on with sensors and devices out there that I don't think we can ever imagine. And we brought up earlier this whole railroad accident. There's sensors all over that track. Yeah. And how much information can you take? And each sensor is going to be an opportunity to go into a system.
Yeah, and attackers are getting, not that they weren't sophisticated 15 years ago, but today they are incredibly sophisticated. The techniques that they're using can easily bypass some of these external systems. So there has to be just continuous protection. That's why when you look at the zero trust architectures, any company that says, "Oh no, we're zero trust," no, you're not. I mean, nobody is, right? We each play a very, very important and specific part of that zero trust architecture. So if you do 3/4 of your zero trust architecture, that unfilled space is going to get attacked and manipulated. There's a 100% guarantee. So you have to really make sure that all of your layers of protection are robust and they're using the latest techniques, because attackers aren't using the same techniques from a year ago even. I mean, every day there is something new. And that's why you have to have a solution or a multitude of solutions that detect the unknown. Because if you're only detecting on what's known, is it valuable? Sure, it's valuable, but it's already known. That was a day ago. Today's a new day and they're doing something different.
Time to look at the crystal ball. So give me your 5-year plan. Tell me the World Series this year. I see predictions for zero trust 3 to 5 years. I don't know if we have 3 to 5 years. I think there's going to be an instance going to really light a fire under some people in this town. I mean, when someone talks 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 months is kind of tough for some software developers to think that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we don't deal in years anymore. Yeah, it's days. Yeah. Once again, like I said, because attackers are doing this every day. They have one mission in life, and that is to figure out how to penetrate your environment and get around your existing tools. So that's why it's important to have such a rich ecosystem and a consortium of players in this zero trust architecture. And believe me, we do collaborate and we work together, but I think it's going to, the old saying, it's going to take a village to solve this problem. And we all have to keep innovating. But, I feel confident in what we do and the piece that we take care of, but we are by no means the only piece of that protection layer. So as long as we all keep working, in the federal government, it's a little hard just because acquisitions take so long. And I know we're not getting into that piece, but that's a big problem in defending, some of the critical infrastructure and the critical systems is, can we get them deployed quick enough? And that's one thing that we try to educate our customers on, and we try to make it easy, right? With our tool, we can come in and deploy and have access and feed data into your SIM, start showing detections through our APIs, integrate with a lot of our ecosystem partners like the Carbon Blacks and CrowdStrikes in one day. And that's, this is no longer an opportunity for us to take a year to implement anything. So crystal ball wise, I have no idea about the World Series. I'm more concerned about the NCAA tournament. So one of the best NCAA tournaments that's been out there. But, I think we're all moving in the right direction. I think this has the right visibility. I think, especially with, some of the executive orders and what CISA is doing, I mean, there's no longer, I think we might have a problem in the future. The problem is today, and we all need to come together and work together and really build solutions that defend what's very important to our national security.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you for your time today. I'm sure our listeners get a better idea of what security-led AI is all about. And I mentioned a white paper earlier. I will put it in the show notes, and you can go to Vectra.ai and download it sometime in the future. I'd like to thank my guest today, Chris Howard, Vice President of Federal Sales at Vectra AI. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much for your time today, and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.